at 7:22 p.m. On a Thursday in October, a woman 7 months pregnant was grabbed by the arm and walked out the side entrance of the Meridian Room in Accra's Cantonments district in front of 41 people who were finishing their dessert. She had been working the floor for 6 hours. She had served tables 7, 12, and 15 without sitting down once. She had not eaten since 11 a.m., a half portion of wakey left over from the staff basin, which she had shared with a junior waitress who was new and didn't yet know where to find extra food on a long shift. Her feet, by the time the manager came for her, had swollen enough that her shoes pressed a crease into the skin above her ankles that would still be there when she got home. The manager's name was Sefa Antwi. He was 39 years old and had been running floor operations at the Meridian Room for 11 years. He did not pull her arm hard enough to leave a mark. That was the kind of man he was, precise about how far he went. He steered her past the kitchen corridor, through the side door marked staff, and out onto the service lane where the delivery vans parked. He told her that Mr. Owusu Kobina had requested she be removed from the floor. He told her that the complaint was about presentation. He did not specify what presentation meant. She did not ask him to, because she had already understood. 2 hours earlier, when the CEO of Arrowhead Capital had looked her over from table 7 and said something to the man seated across from him that made them both laugh with their mouths closed. She was 8 weeks from her due date. Her name was Nana Adwoa Asante. She was 31 years old and weighed 61 kilograms, which her midwife at Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital had told her was 4 kilograms under what she should be carrying by this point in the pregnancy. But Nana had nodded and not explained why the weight wasn't there. Because explaining would have meant telling the midwife that she was splitting her evening meals between herself and her younger sister Efwa, who had just turned 14 and whose school fees were due in 11 days. She stood in the service lane for a moment after Sefa Antwi went back inside. The lane smelled of diesel and something sweet and rotting from the bins near the kitchen exhaust. A cat walked along the top of the low wall at the far end. The cantonment sky above the roofline was the color of old charcoal. A delivery van went past on the street, and its headlights swept across the wall for 2 seconds and were gone. She did not cry in the lane. She had stopped crying at work 11 months ago, the week she buried the child's father, and she had not needed the reflex since, because she had made a decision at that graveside that she would not spend the energy. Grief, she had understood at that graveside, was not something you finished. It was something you carried differently as time passed, the way your posture adjusted when you picked up a familiar weight. She picked up her bag from the staff room, a canvas bag that had belonged to her grandmother, Mame Adwo, who had stitched her initials into the inside hem with dark blue thread in 1989 in Kumasi. The stitching had started to come loose at one corner. Nana had repaired it with the same color thread, bought from the fabric stall on Osu Oxford Street for 2 cedis, and the join was neat enough that you had to look twice to find it. She walked to the bus stop on the main road. The October night had settled into the low 60s, and she had not brought her wrapper, because she had expected to take the staff entrance at the end of her shift and go straight to the 9C without standing on an open road. She stood at the bus stop in her uniform blouse and waited 14 minutes. A trotro went past in the wrong direction, too full, not stopping. A man at the far end of the stop looked at her and then looked away. The 9C came eventually, and she paid her fare and got on and stood the whole 22 minutes. Because the seats were taken, and standing at that point was simply what the body did when the alternative was worse. She rode to the stop closest to the 2-room flat on Judah Estate, where she lived with Efwa and a neighbor's cat that had adopted them 4 months ago, and which Efwa had named Captain. She had been working at the Meridian Room for 9 months. She had taken the job 2 weeks after burying Kwame. when she understood that the money she had would not last past the first month of rent. She had worked through the pregnancy without telling the management, tying her apron loosely and standing straight. And the arrangement had held until the 7th month, when standing straight was not something her body offered anymore, without negotiation. The man who had her removed from the floor was named Bernard Owusu-Kabina. He was 47 years old and had been named in the business section of the graphic business 3 times in the past 2 years. His company, Arrowhead Capital, managed investment portfolios for a list of clients whose names appeared on the boards of 6 of the largest companies operating in Accra. He was tall and wore a watch that cost more than Nana's annual salary. He had a mother. He had not called her in 26 days. His mother's name was Pauline Owusu-Kabina. She was 71 years old. She lived in a house in East Legon that Bernard had bought for her 6 years ago and furnished in a way that she found too cold, too clean, and not enough like the house she had lived in for the 38 years before that, in Tema, where her children had grown up. She still cooked in that house as though she was feeding a family. Too much stew, too much rice, always something extra on the stove. The housekeeper had learned to bring containers on Thursdays. Pauline had her own history with the Meridian Room. She had been taken there 22 years ago by her late husband for their 30th anniversary dinner, and she remembered the tablecloths. That was all she remembered clearly now. White tablecloths, very stiff, with a small red stripe at the hem. She had not been back since his death. She would not have been back at all, except that her grandson Marcus, Bernard's son, who was 9 years old and currently living with his grandmother on alternating weekends because the divorce agreement said so, had asked her if they could go somewhere with real tablecloths. He had seen tablecloths in a book about hotels and had decided this was something that distinguished serious restaurants from ordinary ones. Pauline had agreed that this was probably correct. She had called the Meridian Room and made a reservation for 2 at 5:30 p.m. on a Friday in November, 3 weeks after the Thursday when Nana Asanto was walked out through the side door. Nana was back on shift by then. Sefa Antwi had called her 4 days after the incident to tell her that Mr. Owusu-Kabina's party had settled their bill and left no note of further complaint, and that as long as she managed the issue going forward, he didn't see a need to change anything. He did not define what managing the issue meant. She returned on Monday. She tied her apron and went to table 7 and cleared the place settings from the previous reservation and set it again. The Friday Pauline and Marcus came in was a quiet night. The 5:30 reservation had the restaurant almost to themselves, which Marcus decided was sophisticated. He sat with his back very straight and opened the menu with both hands. Nana was assigned their table. She walked to table 7. She had memorized which tables she was given each shift and moved between them without looking at the floor plan. And she set down the bread basket and the water and began to explain the specials. She had a low, even voice that she had developed for the floor over 9 months. Not theatrical, but clear enough to carry across the ambient noise of a half-full room. Pauline looked at her. She looked at the way Nana held herself. Spine long, chin level, the slight forward tilt that a person gets when they have been standing for hours but refuse to let it show. She looked at the canvas bag visible through the staff entrance door, which Nana had not yet stowed because she'd come straight to the table from the entrance. She looked at Nana's hands, which were dry at the knuckles from the cleaning products, but held the notebook with the kind of steadiness that doesn't come from training, that comes from deciding not to drop things. She looked at the way Nana's weight shifted from one foot to the other and back again, almost invisible, the smallest possible accommodation for pain, and did not let on that she had noticed. Pauline had raised 3 children largely without help. She had worked as a seamstress in Tema for 11 years before her husband's business grew enough that she didn't have to. She recognized endurance when she was standing in front of it. She also recognized the particular quality of someone who was not going to mention that they were enduring, which was a different and rarer thing. Pauline did not interrupt the specials. She waited until Nana had finished and Marcus had asked 3 careful questions about whether the fish was the kind with or without bones, and she said, quietly, "Your feet are swollen." Nana looked at her. "I'm fine, madam." "I know you're fine," Pauline said. "That isn't what I said." She ordered for Marcus. She ordered for herself. She waited until Nana had moved away, and then she said to her grandson, "She's going to need to sit down soon." Marcus looked up from his bread. "Why doesn't she sit down?" "Because nobody has told her she can," Pauline said. Between the starter and the main course, she called Sefa Antwi to the table. She asked him, in the way that 71-year-old women who have raised 3 children and buried 1 husband ask questions, which meant it was not a question at all, whether the young woman serving table 7 had somewhere to rest during the evening. Sefa Antwi said of course. They had a staff area. Pauline said she was glad to hear it, and that she'd like Nana to take 20 minutes once their main course was served. Sefa Antwi opened his mouth and closed it, and said he would see what he could arrange. Nana brought their main courses at 6:48 p.m. Sefa Antwi told her to take her break. She looked at him for a moment, because breaks mid-shift were not standard. He said it was fine. She went to the staff area and sat in a plastic chair and pressed the base of both hands against the small of her back, the way her midwife had shown her. The staff area was a narrow room behind the kitchen passage, with a row of steel lockers along one wall and a long shelf bolted at chest height where the waitstaff kept their phones and their bags and, on slow evenings, a container of food from the canteen down the block. The fluorescent strip above the lockers had been flickering since September. Nobody had replaced it. Captain was at home. Efwa was at home. The school fees were due in 4 days. She had 620 cedis in her account and needed 850. The gap was 230 cedis, and she had looked at it from every direction available to her in the past 3 days. The shift tips she could expect by Thursday. The small amount she kept in an envelope under the kitchen shelf for emergencies. The possibility of asking the woman 3 doors down who had lent her money twice before, and who she did not want to ask a 3rd time. She had been calculating it at intervals throughout the shift the way you calculate a distance you're not sure you can cover, measuring it again to confirm it hasn't changed. The baby moved. She put one hand flat against her belly and held it there for a moment. The kitchen was loud on the other side of the wall, the clatter of pans, someone shouting an order number, the brief rush of heat from the pass. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth the way the midwife had taught her for the days when everything felt like it was pressing inward from all sides. 3 breaths. She looked at the flickering strip light. She thought about Kwame, briefly, the way she often thought about him when she was sitting still. Not the whole of him, but a specific thing, different each time. This time it was the way he used to set her shoes beside the bed on the nights she worked late, aligned neatly, toes facing out, so she wouldn't have to look for them in the dark. He had done it without comment, and she had never thanked him for it, and she thought about that now, in the plastic chair, while the light above the lockers flickered. She stayed 19 minutes and then went back to the floor. When she arrived at table 7 to check on them, Pauline was watching the door she had come through. Marcus had eaten almost everything on his plate, which he confirmed by pointing at it with some pride. "What is your name?" Pauline said. Nana Asante." Pauline's expression did not change. She picked up her water glass and set it down again without drinking from it. "Kwame Asante's wife." Nana went completely still. The restaurant noise continued around them, silverware, a chair pushing back, someone at the bar ordering. "Yes, madam, I knew him," Pauline said. "He worked at Arrowhead Capital for 6 years. He was the most careful analyst on that floor. I met him twice at company functions that I attended with my son." She paused. "I am very sorry for your loss." Nana said nothing for 3 seconds. Then she said, "Thank you. My name is Pauline Owusu Kobina." The name settled into the space between them. Nana heard it and understood all of it at once. The company name, the son's name, the table her late husband had sat across from 3 weeks ago when he was removed from the floor. She looked at the tablecloth. She looked back at Pauline. If you have ever been handed the end of a thread that you hadn't known you were holding, you know what happens next. You do not pull it. You stand still and let the weight of the thread tell you what is on the other end. That is what Nana did. Pauline said, "Kwame spoke very highly of you. He mentioned you to me at the company gala in January, 4 years ago. He said you were the person who kept everything together." I remembered it, because he said it without being asked. "He never told me that," Nana said. "He wouldn't have," Pauline said. "He was not a man who repeated his own compliments." If this story is landing the way I think it is, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because what Pauline does next is the thing that changes everything that follows. She had said nothing to Bernard about the Thursday incident. She had not known about it when it happened, and by the time she pieced it together that evening, she had asked Sefa Antwi at the end of the meal, quietly, whether there had been any problems with staff recently. The anger had moved through her and become something quieter and more deliberate. She asked Sefa Antwi 2 questions. She asked him the name of the woman who had been removed, and she asked him whether the man who had requested it was ever given a reason to regret it. Sefa looked at the tablecloth. She thanked him and left a tip large enough that he did not sleep well that night. She called Bernard the following morning at 7:14 a.m. He answered on the second ring. She told him she had eaten at the Meridian Room. She told him she had been served by a woman named Nana Asante. She told him she had been informed that 3 weeks earlier, at his request, that woman had been walked out of the side entrance in front of 41 people because he had found her appearance inconvenient. She told him that Nana Asante was 7 months pregnant at the time, and that she had continued her shift the moment she was permitted to return. She told him that Nana Asante was Kwame Asante's widow. There was a silence on Bernard's end that lasted long enough that Pauline checked the screen to confirm the call was still connected. Bernard said, "I didn't know." "Which part?" Pauline said. "Did you not know?" He did not answer that. She told him that Kwame Asante had been a senior analyst at Arrowhead for 6 years, and that his record showed he had been responsible for flagging 3 high-risk investments that would have cost the firm a combined total of 4.2 million cedis in losses, and that this information was in his file and had always been in his file, and that the file had his wife's name in the emergency contact field, and that her name had been in that field for 6 years, and Bernard had eaten at a table in a restaurant for 3 hours and had her walked out of a side entrance because of the shape her body was carrying. She told him that she was not angry. She said this in the voice she had used twice before in her life, once with Bernard's father and once with a contractor who had built a wall that was not level, and both of them had known exactly what it meant. Bernard said he would handle it. Pauline said, "Yes, you will." He called Sefa Antwi that afternoon and arranged for a formal written apology and a settlement that covered Nana's lost shift income, plus an additional amount that covered Efua's school fees for the current term and the next 2. This was not because he was a good man by nature. It was because his mother had given him the information he needed to understand what he had done, and she had done it in a way that left him no alternative except to see it. Nana received a phone call on a Monday morning while she was doing Efua's hair before school. The number was one she didn't recognize. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Adaise Bright, assistant to Mr. Bernard Owusu Kobina, and she explained the terms of the arrangement in the way that a well-trained professional delivers difficult information, simply, clearly, with a pause at the end to allow for questions. Nana sat down on the edge of the bed. Efua asked her what was wrong. Nana shook her head and said nothing was wrong and resumed braiding with steady hands. She asked Adaise Bright to confirm the school fee amount. Adaise confirmed it. She asked whether there was anything required from her in return, a signature, a release, a condition. Adaise said only a mailing address for the paperwork. Nana gave her mailing address. She thanked Adaise Bright. She ended the call. She went back to braiding Efua's hair without stopping. She worked to the end of the section, tied the last braid off, checked that it was even. Efua's school bag was by the door. Captain was on the windowsill looking at the traffic. Nana picked up the canvas bag, her grandmother's bag with the stitched initials and the repaired corner, and checked that she had everything inside. She had her phone, her notebook, her midwife appointment card for the following Wednesday. She had 3 receipts she kept meaning to throw away and hadn't. She walked Efua to the corner where the school bus stopped. She came back. She sat down at the small table in the kitchen that was also the dining table and also the place where she calculated money. She did the calculation again, this time with the new numbers. The calculation was different now. She stayed with it long enough to confirm that it was real. Then she washed her breakfast plate, put it on the rack, and went to get her uniform for the evening shift. What Bernard thought he had done to Nana Asante, with one lazy comment to a dinner companion, with a gesture to the floor manager, with the kind of carelessness that is only available to men who have never had to calculate what things cost, was make her invisible. It is a particular cruelty, that kind, because it does not announce itself. Nobody at table 7 had been watching, not even himself. He had simply looked at a woman and decided she was a problem and moved on to his main course. He did not know that the man he had instructed 3 years earlier to present at the board level, the analyst whose instincts had saved Arrowhead 4 million setis in exposure, had come home from that work every evening to the woman carrying his child in a restaurant he would later eat in. He did not know that Kwame Asante had sat in a chair in that flat on Judah Estate and told his wife about the people at the company, described his colleagues and his managers, and that one of the things he had told her was that Bernard Owusu Kobina was the kind of man who noticed numbers more reliably than he noticed people. Kwame had said this without bitterness. He had been accurate. You cannot look at a person's outside. The dress, the swollen ankles, the visible effort of carrying a weight only they can feel, and know what they are carrying on the inside. The world has been sorting people by surface for as long as there have been surfaces to sort by. The man who goes unrecognized at the bank. The woman who gets steered out the side entrance. The child who gets passed over in a classroom because she came in without lunch. What they carry inside does not weigh less because the person looking at them chose not to see it. It does not stop being real because it went unseen. It continues. It compounds. It waits. Kwame Asante left behind a wife who knew how to stand up in a room and make the air in the room feel deliberate. He left behind a sister-in-law who was going to finish her education. He left behind a child who would be born on a Tuesday morning in December, in a room at Corlebu Teaching Hospital, 8 pounds and 4 ounces, and whose grandmother Pauline Owusu Kobina would drive down to see on the second day, unannounced, carrying a container of groundnut soup and a set of yellow blankets that she had bought from the market in Tama the morning after the phone call with Bernard. Because she had learned long ago that the things that needed doing were better done immediately and without explanation. The child's name was Kwame. Nana had known that since the 4th month. Pauline sat in the chair beside the hospital bed and held the child with the ease of a woman who had held 3 of them decades before. And she said to Nana, "He would have been very proud." She said it once and did not repeat it, and they talked about other things after that. Captain the Cat, Efwa's school program, the restaurant on Osu Oxford Street that Pauline thought was worth trying on a Sunday. On the 3rd morning, Nana walked out of Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital, carrying her son. It was 9:14 a.m., and the across sky was white at the edges and blue overhead, and there was a wind coming off the water that smelled the way mornings smell before the city has fully begun. Efua was waiting outside. She had come on the early bus and arrived 20 minutes before, and she was wearing her school uniform because she had come straight from the morning assembly and had not wanted to miss the walkout. Nana passed the child to her sister. Efua held him the way her sister had showed her, both arms, head supported, back of the hand at the nape. She looked at him for a long time. Then she looked up at Nana. "He looks like Papa," she said. "I know," Nana said. They stood in the morning light outside the hospital entrance. The canvas bag was on Nana's shoulder, grandmother's bag repaired at the corner, initials still inside. The bus would come in 11 minutes. There was nothing dramatic in the moment. It was just the 3 of them on a Tuesday morning, beginning, "There are people in this world who have had everything taken from them except the thing that cannot be taken." The knowledge of what they are worth, carried inside themselves like a name stitched into the hem of a bag. Nobody can reach that place. Not a manager with a side door. Not a CEO who looks through a person like glass. Not a system that mistakes the surface of a thing for its whole nature. What is inside is not subject to their authority. You may have been told to leave somewhere that was yours. You may have been looked through by someone who should have seen you. You may have carried weight that nobody around you acknowledged, in your body, in your wallet, in your history, and kept standing up anyway. If you have, then you already know what Nana Asante knew, standing in that service lane on an October evening in Accra, that the door closing behind you is not the end of the story. It is, sometimes, exactly where the story begins. Leave your answer in the comments. If you had been standing in that service lane, 7 months pregnant, shoes pressing into swollen feet, knowing everything you were carrying, what would you have done next? Not eventually. That night. I want to read your answer. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.